This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 17. Rhea Drysdale. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 17 of Experts on the Wire. If I sound a little bit like I'm underwater today, it's just because I'm getting over a cold, but the actual interview will not sound like that. Today my guest is Rhea Drysdale. Rhea is the owner of Outspoken Media, and we're going to chat about what digital ethology is and how that applies to content strategy. She's going to explain what people really mean when they search for how big is an eggplant in Google. We're going to chat a little bit about PR, about reputation management in Google, and what to do if something negative shows up when people search for your brand name. And she's going to tell us her opinion about the difference between using an enterprise SEO tool versus hiring an actual agency. So I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Rhea Drysdale. So I want to jump right into some questions about content strategy. You gave a presentation, it's entitled Applying Digital Ethology, if I'm saying that correct, to Content Strategy. Can you just give us a quick setup to what that is all about?
Sure. So, by the way, thank you for having me, and excited to be here with everyone listening. So digital ethology, and typically said with kind of that hard E, is really... It's not a formal field, but I think that the concept of ethology is something that is known in the sense of the study of animal behavior. And really applying it to digital, we can assume that humans are animals and that we have behavior as well. And what I love when you put those two pieces together is that I really feel like in the SEO and search community, we basically have all of this data that presents us with the opportunity to understand human behavior. And we can see how someone's engaging with search now with a lot of the innovations that are coming out of Google. And we've got predictive search that's happening in AI, and everyone's talking about rank brain lately, but really trying to understand synonyms and intent behind keywords and autocomplete. We can start to get a more complete picture of search behavior and human behavior, which gives us really interesting data about how humans make decisions, how we look for information, how we want to receive content and interact or engage with brands, if at all, when we look at that content, what time of day. And I think that's really where I kind of hit upon the idea of digital ethology. Is my background is interesting. I was a theater nerd that also on the weekends spent my time at the zoo, and I would study primate behavior for hours and hours, and I would log every behavior and every pattern and try to identify what they knew and how they knew it and how they communicated, and basically it was like a little Jane Goodall back in school.
I love it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the value of this is really that it's not just, we're not just picking content out of the air and just making up some type of content we want to create. The value is actually in that we have data and we can observe people and how they interact with search engines. Am I basically getting that?
Exactly. And I tend to ramble. And so that's exactly it, is that there's so much data that's available now. And it's so exciting because before, what could we do? We could do focus groups and some studies, but we really had to be there with a person in a room kind of documenting it. And otherwise, marketing channels, we didn't really have too much data to go off of. We could maybe look at someone's purchase behavior in a store after a television commercial aired, or whether they subscribed to something or chose to receive it in the mail. But there's so many different things that come into that are hard to track. So
awesome. So what you're saying is we have a lot of data now with search engines. So what I want to do is basically take what you're going to tell us and help the listeners find a way to apply it to their situation. So are we talking about content strategy for blog posts, for company websites? Like what type of content exactly would we be talking about?
Yeah, I would say really for anything. And I tried to not limit it too much. Most of our clients come to us with what they perceive to be a particular problem, right? We want more content, or I want to rank for these keywords, or I want these links. And it's very tactical and kind of short-sighted in my mind. And so we take all of our clients and say, well, let's go up, go higher. What is the problem that you're trying to solve in your business, physically, with your customers, whatever that customer looks like, whether it's a reader or an actual client or someone that's giving you money for a product. What is the solution that you provide to them? What are the values and the things about your brand that are unique? Something that most marketers do anyways. But when you really strip everything down to the core of the problem that you're solving, you can start to identify the problem that they have. And at that point, it opens up this whole window of opportunity with content, where content might be very transactional content on static pages for your services or your products, or things of that sort, or it might look more like informational awareness content when you look at a buyer journey. And you want to start to align content at all of those different need points, as well as identify within the content itself different ways to package it. So what I like to do is work with our clients to strip away the assumptions that we make, having been in our industry for a long time, about how someone searches. And you get a lot of executives and leaders who have beliefs about what people are searching for, and they're wrong.
Yeah, a lot of the time they're wrong. So would you say the overarching problem that this approach is solving is maybe to answer the question, what content should we create?
Yes, and it might be videos, because a lot of the times we're looking at search results themselves, because if we just think about static content or blog posts, that's very limiting. Content is consumed in so many different forms. And it might be content that is physically a display within a store that drives someone to perhaps some kind of digital behavior or purchase behavior in their store. And there's so many types of content around us. And what the search results can tell us with that data, and when you're using a tool like maybe Stat Search Analytics or something to look at the full view of the search results page, is what is the intent of that query? And is it a mixed intent? Is it transactional? Is it informational? What is appearing there? Are there a lot of paid ads? Do we have local pack? Do we have videos, images? And then that opens the door to so much in terms of content and what should be produced.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely want to talk about the query types. You mentioned that in your presentation you gave. Where I want to back up to is if it's the SEO agency or consultant or the company, where do we start? Like you mentioned, starting with what the business goals are. Where do you move to from there? Do you try to develop customer personas? Like, what's the next step?
Yeah, we do. Typically, we ask a lot of our, first question, have you done that work before? Do you already have something? Can we validate what you know about your audience against maybe the digital audience? Because sometimes brands have a particular audience offline, and that audience online is very, very different. One of the brands we're working with right now, they sell parts in an automotive field, I'll say. I don't want to limit it too much. And they have been the industry leader for decades, and everybody knows them, and everyone used to receive their catalog. But they're lagging behind when it comes to digital. And the belief is that in their mind, their customer is just not buying as much. Well, that's not true. Their customer is buying, but that's a new customer, not the one that they're used to. And once we started to really dive into the behavior and who they were, we identified several different persona groups and found that, there's that one guy that's hyper engaged. Everything he does in his life is dedicated towards his automotives and how to build them up. And even his job, his school, everything goes towards that. And then we have other folks that are agency owners or hobbyists. And once you have an understanding of them, then you can marry their problem with content that you want to create. Or in the case of that guy that's a super enthusiast, he actually doesn't want to receive content. He wants to create his own content. So he's got, his GoPro attached to his head and all the things that he's doing. And he wants to be putting his videos out there and sharing them. And so that's more of a content strategy where you're bringing content into the brand that your community created for you. And that's awesome. And that's not even, it's content strategy, but it's not specific to the brand having to create it. It's community development now. And so that's where this kind of opens the door to so many different departments and people having to collaborate and work collaboratively. Yeah.
And how specific are you getting with your personas? Are you trying to get really specific down to like income and what their hobbies are? are you just trying to get a rough idea in mind of who that person is you're trying to attract?
Sure. So I have to give props, obviously, to Mike King for my pull rank, because this is an area that he's championed in, I think, our field, even though it's not new as an industry. We've been doing market research and persona development for decades. But and what I like is it actually all goes back to Carl Jung. And so when you look at, Jungian theory and the development of persona types and models and kind of archetypes that people have, my background is also, my mom's a storyteller, so I love the idea of story. Persona research is interesting because you have to marry the art and the science of it. And we like to pull in as much data as possible. So when a client does have the ability to give us tens of thousands of zip codes, then we're going to try to process those, identify users down to physically where they're located, tap market research, get as much data back on their demographics as possible, but then also try to marry that with psychographics, balance it with social profiles. We physically start to stalk people online and identify who they are and validate that against competitors and other types of data that we can pull in.
Awesome. So we've started with business goals. Now we're into personas, and you mentioned query types, and I'm going to kind of lead the question a little bit. So obviously I do SEO, so I know there's informational, transactional, navigational, and you mentioned another query type in your presentation that I'll let the listeners in onto that. But is that kind of the next step, is figuring out what sort of content type map to query types where the company needs to create?
100%. Because I think if you don't understand the intent of the query, then you're completely missing the mark. And I feel like this is the one place where Outspoken has an edge on everything, even other digital agencies, because they understand keywords and they understand content and they start to put them together. But if you don't take that extra step and really go and look at the search result and say, does this meet intent? You have failed. And,
right.
I hate to put it in that black and white term, but, one example.
Can you explain the different query types? I think the listeners would love to hear about that.
Sure. So, sorry, stepping back. So we've got informational, which is very in the sense of I want to know, why can't I think of queries right now? How tall is the Empire State Building? Or a recipe for something, or things like that. And then we've got transactional. So I want to purchase a little black dress for an event that's coming up. Or I'm looking to buy some office supplies on Amazon. That's physically getting to the point of purchasing. And then navigational is actually the most common, which is fun when we go to Google and we type in Gmail, because we don't want to actually type in gmail.com. So we just, navigational is trying to get somewhere. So when you type in a brand name or something. And then the fourth type that I think I mentioned, I can't even remember it at this point, but was, I believe, answers.
Yeah, questions and answers. Yep.
I'm glad I answered my own question there. So with question and answers, that's kind of an interesting space that we're getting into now, where in the past, Google was a search engine in the true sense that you type something in, you search for it, and then they provided you with someone else that had the answer. But now they're becoming more and more an answer provider. And that's really scary for a lot of brands, because now we're seeing that you can type in math questions or actual questions about flights and
insurance calculator was one I did the other day, and Google has one now.
Which is terrifying for every single person that ever built an insurance calculator.
Yes.
Right. So, the biggest competition that we see for our clients at this point is Google, which is where I love tools like Stat Search Analytics, because you put in all your keywords and they'll pop out and say, for all of your keyword set or within these tags, the amount of competition that you have is this % from these sites. And without a doubt, like every time, Google is at the top, usually at 10 to 11% of competition and overlap for the keyword terms, which means we're competing with answer boxes and answer results and so many other things that are now getting incorporated into search.
So you have a great tangible example, two of them actually in your presentation. One is about toddler trampolines and the other one is exterminators. Can you talk about the toddler trampoline exactly? What was the problem was this for a client or something you worked on?
No, it was just, Yeah, I recently had a baby, so I was doing some research on various things, and my favorite query is actually one where I typed in how large is an eggplant or how big is an eggplant, and I asked the room, this is the big reveal. What is this? What is the point of that query? Why would someone type in how big is an eggplant? And some people in the room raised their hands and they said, I think because they're trying to figure out how big a pan they need to put an eggplant in to cook it or something. But for those that were parents, everyone raised their hand and they went, because you want to know how big your baby is. Exactly. And that's exactly where you need to look at that and go, okay, if I'm, allrecipes.com or something, and I'm looking up keywords and I see something about an eggplant, I might decide randomly that I want to target that term because it has tons and tons of search volume. But that entire query, when you type it in, is actually tied back to how big is a baby, because all the little apps that you use on your phone to track how big your baby is as you're pregnant relates it back to the size of fruits and vegetables.
Funny.
So the point being there that, I just had a baby and I also have a toddler, and I was trying to figure out with this crazy toddler, how do I keep him amused and when I have a baby? And if I were to type in toddler trampoline, do I just want a trampoline? Well, maybe, but really as a parent, there's so many different layers there that if you, as a brand, don't just stop at the keyword and build out a product, but you actually think about the resources and why someone needs that. There might be a parent that's got a kid with some sensory disorders or other things going on, or they're trying to introduce a new sibling, like in my case, and so I want to keep him busy and burn off his energy. There's so much content that you can create. But you have to step back and you have to get to know that story and that person. And again, their point of need.
So what you're kind of talking about is old school SEO was companies now, like you were saying, they might come to you or me and say, we want to rank for this keyword. But when you look at it and you look at the intent, it makes no sense when you're actually reverse engineer what that person might be going through. So is your advice sounds like it's to question the keywords that you think you want to rank for, because maybe you don't, and maybe that leads you laterally into other areas. Can you talk a little bit? So you had some examples about toddler trampoline and maybe alternative things that alternative keywords that they might actually want to rank for.
Yeah. So in that instance, I'd be looking at, you've got the product page. So you still want to absolutely rank, if you're a company like Amazon or someone that's providing that, you still want to rank for all the transactional terms. But there's all the awareness and consideration and decision-making types of terms that come into that. And so in those instances, you want to start thinking about perhaps resources or guides that you can create. One idea I'd had just randomly was like, you could do something about toddler development in different stages, or like I mentioned, sensory disorders. You could put together, go to Pinterest, which has so much, and a lot of it's not that pretty, actually. But you can just type in these terms and see that for toddler trampoline, it relates back to all these different things, and those things often are like an activity sheet or a guide or a checklist of things to do with your kid in the summer or all the different seasons. And now with your editorial calendar, you can start to build in all these topics and determine, does this support our business objective? Will this get us on the radar of someone that could be a customer that we may not have tapped yet? Does this align with those personas? And can we create content reasonably within our resources and budget? And where does that go seasonally? So
awesome. So one thing you sort of touched upon there a little bit was maybe a goal of the content. Does the content that you are strategizing around, do you have different goals around that? Are you looking at search volume? Are you looking at things that we'll share on social? How do you approach goals?
Yeah, so every piece of content typically has multiple goals. And I came into this podcast having just left a client strategy meeting with our team, looking at, full month is coming up. What are we going to do? First conversation is, how's the content from last month performing? How's the content from all time performing? Do we have content that needs a little bit of lift? It's getting there with search, with rankings, and we already know that it's got search volume because that's why we wrote it. But perhaps it needs to be driven a little bit more. So we're going to write something else to try to support that and link and cross-link. But with every piece, we're looking at, where does it fall in terms of that buyer journey. What is the purpose of this? Where does it fall in terms of perhaps brand goals? Because sometimes brands just want certain news to get out there. Is it something that's going to be successful on social? Is it something that's going to be successful with search? Perhaps another purpose? And if so, is it equal weight, or is it more just for organic or just for search? Is it a really big piece that we need to get a lot of backlinks in from? Because not every piece is equal, and often we're doing pieces that have blended purposes, or one day we'll do something just to get those links in because we know that it's going to be a big, big splash. But really, it might only have one keyword. It's not even going to perform well with search, but you need the balance.
Absolutely. Let's talk quickly about the exterminator example. I want to give the listeners one more tangible example for how they can take what seems like just a straightforward search. I think your example was maybe like exterminator in New York, or like some kind of search around finding that. What are alternative keywords or phrases that you could actually think about in that context?
So that's my fave. We had a client that came to us that they were an exterminator and they wanted to grow. And it was totally by chance that I hit upon this, but I was laying in bed one night thinking about this client, and all of a sudden I heard something scratching in the walls. And I went, what is that sound? I think I actually cursed. There was some, expletives in there. And I jumped out of bed and I woke my husband up. I'm like, what is that sound? And of course, you start Googling. And that's what I did. And I suddenly realized I've become their customer. And I wasn't typing in exterminator New York. I was typing in, what is that sound?
Right.
It sounds like this. There's scratching in my walls. There's this. And I realized that that's what people do. They don't even know what the problem is yet. And yes, I want someone to come and get whatever that thing is out of my wall, but I don't know what the thing is. And so exterminators tend to put together words that they use, but not words that people actually search on in that panicked state. And so when we realized that, we started to put together this really exciting library of content around all the different species. And we created content around how you would know if you had that. And so that would be examples of, you might hear scratching in the walls, right, and things of that.
So another example I can think of is I have a client that basically has like a directory site for audiologists. And oftentimes people won't be searching for, hearing doctor in Boston, Massachusetts. They'll be searching for ringing in ears, or whatever the problem is. So I just want to relay another example there to the listeners. That library you mentioned, what is that exactly? Is that many actual pages tied together in with a table of contents? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, very much like that. So, we found that when it came to the actual species that people are often exterminating, there's two types of query, or when you type in the name of an animal, let's say a rat, you usually get a combination of exterminators, or you get something that's very scientific, like the genus, species, and all of that information off of Wikipedia, plus academic resources or zoology. And there was nothing in the middle that appealed to the everyday person that just kind of has a general interest and needs to know, is it dangerous? Will it bite me? How do I know that it's here? What does it poop? What does their poop look like? Here's a picture of that thing. And its habitat is generally this. And so that's where we started to create a page around those types of words and content to support them. And then it really was just like that, just a big library, and everything was kind of connected and cross-linked.
What are your feelings on 10x content? This is the big rage now, and I'm leading you a little because I know you have thoughts about this. So talk to us about that. 10x content.
I like being led. You're doing an excellent job here. This is fun. So 10x content, it's been called many things. I once lost my head literally exploded in a meeting when we were told by a client, we're going to have epic content. And I said, that's not a concept. That's not a strategy, right? You went to a presentation, someone said epic content, and everyone decided we're going to take our content and put the word epic next to it. And I feel like 10x content is very trendy and everyone's talking about it. But really, how many people can actually afford to build that out? And does it scale? And for many industries, it doesn't. And I think that it doesn't even follow Google's trend. Google isn't trying to give the most credit, in my opinion, to the person with the biggest content. And what they're trying to do is give credit to the person with the most authoritative content. And that's really important, is for us to look at what's coming out of Google and follow, Bill Slawski, and be all up in the patents that are coming out, and understand that Google is making pushes, even with the loss of author rank, to go more towards authoritative content, and that it will never go away. They're trying to figure out the authority, and that's built into the algorithm at this point. So if you can be the authority in something, you don't have to put together something ginormous. You just have to be the person with the answer. And that answer might be a quick numbered list that's 5 sentences, but it's the best resource of anything else on the web. So that's my opinion, is be authoritative, don't be big.
Yeah, let's go down this authoritative path for just 1 second. I've noticed 99% of the time when a client creates a piece of content and an expert has actually created that content, that it tends to do really well. It even ranks better. And on the flip side, obviously, when a novice or somebody that's not an expert creates the content, it doesn't perform as well. So I guess my question here is sort of, how do you think Google is able to tell that an actual expert has created the content? Do they have some kind of author rank, or is it just the quality of the content itself? What do you think?
No, they do. So there's and I can't remember it right now. I know it's in the deck. Everyone check out slideshare.net/Rhea Drysdale, I believe is the URL.
We'll link it in the show notes.
Perfect. So the Moz deck, I know I cited in there the most recent patent that came out with the authoritative content mapping. And basically, the way that they're doing it is they do identify an authority for a particular subject. And then what they're looking at is kind of like with links, they're looking for citations. So like a chain of this person then references this, which attaches to here. And then how many times is this referenced in relation to that? And it becomes a web of authority, just like we have a web of links. And I really think that, what made Google unique in the beginning was the fact that they had links as a way of looking at content that no one else had. That's the genius of PageRank. But now if you can put author rank kind of on top of that, that's brilliant. And that really gets even more to the point of what they're trying to do, as to serve up the most authoritative content.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think citations, I also had this hypothesis in my head. I've never told anybody, but I've some kind of feeling that maybe the search volume for that person's name and then what people click on, or maybe some kind of search interaction might have to do that as well. The one thing
knowledge graph.
Yeah, knowledge graph. Yeah. One thing I'm wondering about is, let's say, so Marie Haynes, she was on episode number 1, the very first episode. She's an expert in penalties, Google penalties. Let's say somebody, not her, authors an article about Google penalties and puts her name on it without her permission. Like, is this something Google can pick up on?
Interesting. I don't know. And I think that's an interesting thing to try to experiment with. I would argue that it's probably so in its infancy that it's not fully developed at this point, but that's what they're moving towards, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I'm just guessing, I'm pulling things out of air, but I would assume that they're trying to move towards that. I don't see a lot in the way of citation. Yeah, my team asked me the other day, they said, are citations something that really drives search rankings? And I haven't seen enough good studies to say that that's the case, to say that with certainty, but I guarantee they're trying to.
Yeah, interesting. So I want to move the conversation to a little bit about press and PR, specifically with Outspoken Media. So you have actually a really nice looking press page on your site with a lot of good press citations on it. Has that helped Outspoken Media in any way in terms of leads or recruiting people or clients sticking around? What kind of positive benefit have you seen? And then maybe could you apply to other businesses?
Sure. And I don't know that we've updated that in a while. I decided to take about 4 years of silence while I had babies. So I'm excited to be back out in the industry and more PR to come. So PR is interesting. I think that when it's in the hands of someone that really understands how to position you and your audience and where they're at, that it can be very, very beneficial. Outspoken Media was actually outed by the Wall Street Journal, and we had been in existence for about 2 weeks. We didn't even have a website together yet. And I had an article coming out with the chief technology editor at the time of the Wall Street Journal, Julia Ingwin, and she had interviewed me for something. And she said, "Hey, this article is about to come out on Friday. Are you still at such and such company?" I said, "No, we just put our company together." Oh man, we quickly whipped together our website. We got it live. And the next day, this article comes out and we got so many leads from it. So when you've got a great article, yeah, obviously it can hit this wonderful audience that can find you. But the flip side of that is one time we got picked up by, I believe it was PayPal, who sent out an email to every single person on PayPal and included a link to us. And that was 2 days before Thanksgiving. And I remember we got, I think, over 200 leads in 48 hours. Not a single one became a client. So,
that's what you call a bad lead.
Bad leads. And it became a giant problem right before Thanksgiving because everyone's mad if you don't get back to them. So my belief is basically with PR that it has to be targeted, has to be good. The best leads that come to us come from word of mouth or existing clients or people who know us. And when PR works, that's exactly what it is.
Do you see that helping in any way to, I don't know if you hire a lot, but has it helped kind of attract people? You're in kind of also an obscure location, Troy, New York. It's not exactly the tech mecca or marketing mecca of the world, although I hear it's nice up there. Has that helped at all as well, attracting potential employees or any other kind of, business relationships?
Yeah, so we actually have basically Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute is right up the hill, and they practically own all of Troy. And so we have this really interesting community here of gamers and developers and programmers and data analysts and data visualizers, people that are super techie. And then other than that, it's kind of a small town. So we don't really get that marketer mind. We get a lot of really heavy, technical minds here. So we're trying to always identify people that are in the area that can get taught what we do. And bring other skills to them, or people that are willing to move here. We tried to do remote for a while. It wasn't quite working. PR does help in that sense. It puts us on the radar of a lot of folks, but I think that unless they really have a desire to live here or are already here, it's kind of hard to make that leap to wanting, what am I trying to say? We have a lot of people apply. We don't always have a lot of people work out.
Right.
And so PR helps because everybody sees Outspoken and how cool our office is, and we've got a dog, and you can bring your baby to work, which is really fun. But the reality and actually making the choice to live here is a little bit harder.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a little similar to that in Worcester, Massachusetts, where I am. A lot of people end up going to Boston or New York or whatnot. So is there one maybe PR tip we can leave for the listeners? Let's say that they're part of a business, or maybe they're trying to improve their own blog or their personal brand or whatever you want to call it. Any tip that you can give the listeners for acquiring more PR, more press?
Yeah, I would say in order to have press, you have to have something to say. And that seems like such a simple tip, but so many people forget it. And so everyone goes, man, I want PR. And they think that they're going to go hire a PR firm. Well, the PR firm is going to say the same thing. What do you have that's newsworthy? So you need to be really thinking about what you can dedicate time and effort to. And if you're someone that is just going to comment on what's happening in the news because you've got an expert opinion, then that's great. That can happen. But then you're positioning your own personal brand. If you're trying to build up your company or your brand itself, your corporate brand, then you can't necessarily put that as much on individuals. It has to come from news coming out of your company, which might be an announcement that you're one of the best places to work or that you're going public. But if you don't have those big announcements, then you need to be creating something that is of value to someone.
Got it. Good tip. Let's shift a little to a slightly similar topic, reputation management. And this has definitely really changed a lot kind of in the digital age. Is there any advice you can give business owners about being more proactive about their reputation management online?
Yeah, there's a lot of advice, which is ironic because we are Outspoken Media and I have a tendency to not take my own advice. in the sense that I'm outspoken. So, right, like you would think that someone that does reputation management tries really hard to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
But I feel that the best thing you can do is be honest and be transparent. And really, with managing your reputation online, what it comes down to is being accessible and responsive. And so a lot of reputation problems occur because someone felt like they weren't listened to, or they couldn't get access to you to, share their concern or the complaint, or that they did and it wasn't resolved.
So kind of their last step is they couldn't get a hold of you, so then they're going to go to Google or Yelp or whatever and complain.
Exactly.
Right. So do you have any advice for sites that might end up with a bad result? Like, let's say somebody searches around a brand name and bad reviews show up, or a negative article about some kind of scandal or something. Do you have any advice for bumping down those negative results?
Sure. So first thing, stop doing whatever you did to contribute to that. Or own it. Sometimes owning it is fine. But then from there's the idea of suppression versus, removal. If you can, try to remove it at the source. There are some reputation management folks who will literally go and try to hack someone's site to get it taken down, or file DMCA takedown or something. We tend to not go into that kind of black area of reputation management. My belief is work with them as much as you can, get lawyers involved if you really need to, and it actually merits that. But typically it's about suppression. And the best way to do that is, of course, to have positives that displace the negatives. And in that sense, it's no different than normal SEO, where you're really just trying to make sure that the keywords are on the pages that you want and aren't on the ones that you don't, and then get backlinks in and cross-link everything. And I think that where people don't succeed in reputation management is they don't pay attention to the details. And what I mean is that everyone will link to their social profiles, but a lot of the times those social sites are updating their URLs. They've gone from HTTP to HTTPS. They used to have a hash bang in the URL, now they don't. At what point did you put those links to your social accounts, and now are those running through 301s or multiple chains of 301s, and you're losing value. So you got to pay attention to the details of every link and make sure that they're canonical, and do an audit of those links frequently.
Yep. That's one thing I always recommend to clients as well, is eliminating redirects and redirect chains internally and then externally as well. That's a really good tip. So you wrote an article about SEO budgets versus platforms. Well, I guess platforms versus agencies when it comes to budgets. So can you speak to that a little bit? Like, what if you're a brand or a company trying to decide between this enterprise platform and then an agency? What are kind of the pros and cons of each, and how can you help a business make that decision?
Sure. So, all right, let's talk about this. It's a heated subject in my brain that's been there for about 2 years. I actually wrote that blog post 2 years ago, and I didn't publish it because
Really?
had a baby and all that. But really, that's a poor excuse. I think I was scared because I didn't want to piss off all the platforms. Can I say that word?
Yes. Yep.
All right.
I had Everett Taylor on the show I recorded it last week, and he dropped a few F-bombs, so you're fine.
Okay, so with platforms versus people, and that's how I like to phrase it, is that a platform is a wonderful tool to help you when you have a very large site to identify big problems to scale. How many pages do I have that are missing title tags that should be written by hand? And can I now use this tool to assign that to a marketer in-house that can go and do this task? And so it's great for task management. It's great for monitoring. It's great for looking at the rankings of your keywords and how that content is performing. And a lot of the enterprise level tools now have some kind of competitive data that they're bringing in that you can determine where are you relative to your industry. But that's not strategy. And that's not a human going, what does this actually mean? It's task driven, it's tactical, and I don't think it's going to actually get you ahead unless you have that other mind and someone that can look at the data and do something and understands what it means relative to your audience and where Google's going and where you want to go. And a lot of the times you don't have someone in-house that possesses that level of experience or knowledge to really use the tool the way that it needs to be used. So it's not that the platform is bad or that an agency is bad. It's that they're both great, but you got to use them together. And in-house, typically they've got a certain amount of budget, and they're saying, well, I can only really spend $6,000 on something. Do I choose the platform or do I choose the agency? My belief is that you should choose an agency that has the platform so that you can get the best of both worlds if that's a problem that you have. But everyone is different, and some people really just need the platform. But what upset me is that the platforms were trying to rank for our terms. So there were some platforms that were aggressively going after our keyword sets as agencies, and agencies didn't even notice it.
So so the platforms were going after like keywords like SEO company or SEO agency?
Yep.
Very interesting. So to step it back also, you were finding that brands or businesses were actually trying to choose between you, an agency, or a platform. That was actually your competitor.
The most common competitor that we have for our leads does not come from agencies like Sear or Distilled or Portland, folks that I love and respect. It comes from platforms.
Interesting.
Everyone comes to me and says, well, we're trying to decide between you and Searchmetrics or BrightEdge or Conductor. And I go, wait, what?
Yeah,
I'm very confused.
That's like if we were to break that into analogy in any other industry, like I'm trying to decide between a handyman or a chainsaw, or like a handyman and a like it doesn't make any sense in any other situation. So it's odd to me as well. It definitely jumped out at me when I saw that article. Is there, if you're being honest, is there ever a case where a platform would be the choice?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that when you've got someone in-house that has a really strong background in SEO, and there are a lot of folks that have very, very knowledgeable backgrounds in SEO that are in-house. In those cases, they just probably need a tool to help automate a lot of things. They need a tool to help task out a whole team of people and to monitor the activities that are going on and competitive data sets. And they've got their own dashboards and things reporting into them, and they know how to set it up. In that instance, that's perfect. That's what you need it for. But without that person in-house, I don't think that it doesn't make sense. And I think that maybe in some cases, platforms do have account managers where they might be able to help guide that depending on the level of package and what you're doing, of course. So if you've got the budget to throw at that, that also works.
Awesome. Yeah. So the moral is that whether it's in-house or with an agency, you should have somebody with the kind of the experience and brain power to put the strategy behind the data that the tools have for you. Definitely agree. Obviously, I agree. I run an SEO agency as well. That makes sense. So I want to shift a little. Well, I've got about 10 minutes left before I have a client phone call, which I don't care about saying on the show. But I want to ask quickly about employees and their personal brands. So do you have any feelings one way or the other, like if you have an employee that kind of represents the company, but also at the same time might be developing their personal brand? Because that's always potentially a risk where if that person gets more popular on their own, that maybe they might be tempted to leave or be recruited to another situation. So do you have any feelings about that one way or the other?
Yeah, so, I've certainly struggled with it. We've had a lot of people come and go at Outspoken. I think, we've been around for 7 years at this point and 2 partner buyouts, and a lot has happened. And the one thing that I've identified at this point, slowly, reluctantly, as a business owner who does take everything too personally, is that people will come and go. And, it's not a marriage by any means. I'm not going to be here in like 20 years, right? So I don't know. We'll see. But the thought there is that it's a two-way street, and it's an exchange, and it's transactional. You've hired someone to deliver something for you, and in exchange, they want something for themselves. That something might be a paycheck, but in today's world, especially with millennials, I hate to jump on that millennial bandwagon. Anyone of any generation should want this. They are wanting education and opportunity more. In some cases, they're looking for a particular title to help get to another point in life, or they want to move to certain industries, so they want to work on certain types of clients or expand that skill set. My belief is that as long as it continues to be mutually beneficial, then it's wonderful. The moment that it's cannibalistic or dangerous or whatever towards the business, I stop being supportive. But when it's mutually beneficial, then that's wonderful. And we love our alumni to the point that we've actually put them on our About page with the careers section. We want to let people know that when you come to Outspoken, you're not just getting a job, you are getting a career. It is like boot camp. I have so many team members that have started here, and they don't realize until they leave just how much they've learned and grown in a short period of time. And I take pride in the fact that when people leave us, they go and become directors and VPs or start their own businesses. And that's wonderful to see.
And how many people are at Outspoken Media now?
Yeah, so at the moment, and I was going to say, quick shout out, by the way, PubCon, Pearl Higgins is our Director of Client Services. She will be speaking at PubCon for the first time. She's attended 4 years in a row. And when she started with us, she was a part-time office manager. She's now our Director of Client Services.
And when is PubCon?
So PubCon, I believe, is October 11th to the 13th or something like that in that week.
Plenty of time, because this episode won't launch for a few weeks, so...
Yeah, no, plenty of time for people to still go register and get some good prices on the tickets. But if you want to go, she'll be talking about storytelling. And I've been so excited to see her come into her own and start speaking. So at the moment, we are at 7. We had been at 11, and then we lost a few. I think that we grew too fast. And I will totally admit that I knew I was about to have a baby, and I pushed really hard. And I said, okay, here are all the things that I want to do before I have that baby. I need to get these roles in. We're going to do a full office move. We're going to launch our website. We're going to rewrite the content. We're going to do so much stuff. We're going to do a full benefits new service. We had a new CFO come on. It was too much. And I'll admit that it burned out a couple people. And in one instance, she moved for love. I think who was it? Janet Driscoll. I can't remember her. She has 2 last names. It's hyphenated, I think. But Janet mentioned at one point that a lot of her team members move for love. And I thought that was interesting to see, is that people move for opportunity, but a lot of times you're leaving people because of a relationship or their family or their spouse.
That's always a good reason to move. So I want to circle kind of to the last question, tying in a little bit to kind of your role as a CEO. You've kind of stepped away in some regards in terms of like being public, because you've had 2 babies now, I think, right? Yeah. Done.
Yep. No more.
2 is the limit. So that's 2 more than my limit, by the way. But you wrote an article on Medium, the female marketer's fear of marketing, and we'll link to that in the show notes. You talked a little bit about being scared about feedback and comments from others, specifically crude feedback, which to me is always shocking to hear about and definitely upsetting. But can you speak a little bit more to this issue, and how has the reaction been, I guess, to that article since you've published it?
Yeah. So the reaction was interesting. It was very strong. Lots of opinions. So many women came out and said, I understand completely, 100%. I get it.
Me too.
Oh, completely. Everybody, been there, done that. I only had a handful of women say, oh, that's never really happened to me, which I thought was interesting. And I'm trying to identify, well, why, what was unique about that woman. And in the female marketer community, we do talk about it. And I actually know of, I shared with a couple people my experiment that at conferences, I used to dress in jeans and a blazer and kind of a nerdy shirt. And then I started embracing my femininity, and I wore more heels and dresses. And I stopped getting approached when I embraced that kind of inner female beauty in my mind in the exterior form. And it was really interesting to see that when I was more feminine, I had less people talk to me. I had less men talk to me.
And why do you think that is?
I don't know. You can get into sexuality and attraction and being put off and scared or other things of that sort, or seen in a different light, or maybe seen as less intelligent when I'm not wearing glasses and hair pulled back in a blazer. I don't know. There's so many things that can come into that, and I don't know what they are. But I know of several women at this point that are running their own kind of anecdotal experiments. They've decided to stop wearing dresses, and they're going to be going in jeans and blazers to see what the impact is.
Interesting.
Because what we see is kind of 2 sides, especially in certain conferences. There are some women that are super feminine to a certain extent and very, very beautiful, and they get really good feedback. And then there's kind of the more like masculine woman that gets really good feedback, but it feels like that middle area where you're just kind of a normal woman.
Right.
Doesn't perform well.
Right. Interesting.
And that's a really weird thing to say and talk about. And it's really awkward. And it makes me feel uncomfortable to say it like that. But that's what we're seeing.
So where do you kind of stand now on this issue, I guess, or personally? You mentioned you are going to be kind of stepping back into the field more of speaking and doing podcasts, obviously. So I guess where do you feel like you stand now since the post has come out?
Sure. My favorite comments were those that said, it doesn't matter. Just go do your thing. And people are going to say things, and they do say things. They say awful things. I have had things said to me that I left in tears, or I left feeling assaulted and like I needed a security guard with me. And it still feels dangerous to an extent, but I don't care. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to surround myself with good people. I'm not going to be in certain groups at conferences. I'm going to avoid those that have offended. And I'm going to listen to the positives and be excited when someone like you asks me to come on a podcast and just be able to nerd out about Google and content strategy and keywords. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be myself, and I'm going to represent our brand, and what comes will come.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that all the listeners can take note of conferences that take action or help these situations, and vote with the money they spend and which conferences they attend. Like Moz, for example, which you and I both know the people at Moz very well. They were one of the first conferences I've seen to put out a really thorough code of conduct and really take proactive stance on that. And I would encourage the listeners to just be aware of the conferences that are doing a good job in that area and those that might not be. So
I know we're almost out of time and you got to go to a call, but one quick note about Moz. They recently shared that, and they have tried so hard to have equal representation of genders on that stage at MozCon. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, they have seen the percent of female attendees go up by almost 20%.
I saw that. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. When women feel safe, women show up.
Absolutely agree. And one thing that I haven't really said publicly, but we're trying to do that with this podcast as well. And not just gender, but all kinds of backgrounds. And I hope that people do, I guess, take notice, at least in our kind of indirect way. One last quick fun question. I have about 30 seconds. I know you like to drink tea. So what are 3 people, past or present, that you would like to sit down with for some tea?
Oh, man. Okay. 3 people, past or present. Well, I'll go with 2 of my idols. So Ridley Scott, director, Diane Fossey, who's now deceased, but primatologist. And then, I don't know, for fun, maybe throw in someone like Pablo Picasso. I don't know, someone just with like a really crazy mind.
Hey everyone, I'm back with my nasally voice. I cut it off there at the end because I really liked Rhea's answer, but I kind of stumbled on my reply to her answer at that time and just basically said that I never would have thought to mention somebody like historic or deceased like that. So that was kind of clever. So I hope you picked up a lot of things from my conversation with Rhea Drysdale, and I hope to see you next time on the next episode of Experts on the Wire. That's all I got. That's all we're going to say today. See ya. Music by me.